Welcome, Martin and Sharrock, to Stockholm and Sweden. What have you done in New Zealand, in broadband rollout?
Yeah, I think it's less what we've done and more what we're doing. We're now 3 years into the build of a major fibre network. Basically, we're building New Zealand's fibre future. We've spent 3 years now learning how to build fibre networks, and now one quarter of the way through the project. We've passed 250,000 homes, which is a lot. We've learned a lot along the way. Our target is 1 million homes by 2019, which again is a lot. We're a telecoms company. We're a separated telecoms company. We're an open access, bitstream and fibre provider, but we've learned to be a civil constructor. We really know now how to build networks, how to dig up roads, how to reseal roads, how to work with the councils, how to work with the power companies. So yes, we're a telecoms company, that's our business, that's where our revenues come from, but we've really learned how to build fibre networks.
But why this rollout started? Wasn't this just happen by the market, or was this the government force it in some way, and why?
Yeah, I think force is the wrong word. I think it's visionary. Don't forget that New Zealand is not surrounded by lots of other countries like in Europe. We're very close to Australia, but that's it. I think for a country like New Zealand to compete on the national marketplace, we need fantastic connectivity. So it's quite visionary to say that New Zealand shouldn't have just good broadband connectivity. We need to have excellent broadband connectivity. So the vision of the government and the vision of the telcos is that we will have fantastic broadband connectivity by 2019. I mean, if you want to talk technically, we have a really good fibre to the node network. We've had this since 2011, and we're overbuilding the fibre to the node network. So in New Zealand, fibre to the node is not good enough. In New Zealand, we're building fibre to the home.
Yeah. You were the incumbent from the beginning. You separate the infrastructure from the service. Why and what have the benefit or the not benefit been with this?
Yeah, obviously it's been not a voluntary separation. The government actually promoted the separation by saying that to run the fibre project you cannot be a retail service provider, so you must be a separate company. So Telecom New Zealand offered to separate into two companies. One company is now Telecom New Zealand, the other company is Chorus, which is us. So we're a totally separate company. It wasn't voluntary, but when you look at the share price immediately after the separation, the addition of the two is more than it was previously. So maybe the government was right, maybe it was a good thing to do.
And how you succeed when you roll out now? The uptake, the interest to get fibre and so on?
Yeah, I mean, there's huge interest in fibre in New Zealand. There's huge interest in the ultra-fast broadband project, and uptake has really started to move ahead. As well as fibre, we've launched VDSL2, so VDSL2 update is very big as well. So we've passed 250,000 properties, and approximately 30,000 of these have taken fibre. It doesn't seem so many, but we've only just handed over many of these areas, and also the big telcos, the really big guys like Telecom New Zealand and Vodafone, have only just onboarded the new technology and started to launch triple play services. So we expect that the take-up rate is going to be very fast over the next 1 or 2 years. 6% now is going to be much more in 1 or 2 years' time.
How do you be able to finance this massive rollout?
So the rollout of the fibre network is costing $1.8 billion over 10 years, a lot of money, but less than some. Half of this is being financed by Chorus. We're providing the money and we're providing the capital to do this. The other half is being financed by the government. It's not a stimulus. It's debt and equity from the government that must be paid back. So it's a public-private partnership in New Zealand to help fund this $1.8 billion.
And how will it look in the future? When will you be finished, and what's the challenge?
Yeah, the build we finished by 2019. So we're building about 110,000 addresses every year. So I think our job in the next 7 or 8 years is to make sure the build is on time, to make sure the build is to good quality, but also we have a responsibility to make sure that there's good uptake and there's good ideas for how we're going to use the fibre. I mean, Chorus, even though we're an open access bitstream provider, we are working with the community, we're working with cities, we're working with hospitals, we're working with the communities to say, how can you use fibre? And I expect that even though we're passing 1 million addresses and 1 million properties, there's likely going to be much more endpoints that are using fibre beyond these addresses. We're building our network with additional capacity to make sure that we can connect anyone, anything, anywhere, anytime in the next 10 to 20 years.
Comparing with a lot of countries around the world, New Zealand is quite small. You're talking about number of inhabitants. What can other cities or the country learn from you, and what will you give for advice for others who are interesting to?
Yeah, I think it's how to have a vision for fibre. I think if you're going to build fibre, you need to concentrate on building fibre. It's very good to have a technology mix, but fibre to the home networks are expensive, they're complicated. It's a big civil project that you have to run in your country, and you have to line up all the incentives. The government has to be lined up, the regulator has to be lined up, the money has to be available, and you have to have the skills in your marketplace. So it's really, really important that you concentrate on building a fibre network and don't become distracted from the end goal.
You're going soon back to New Zealand. You've been here some days. What will you tell others when you come back?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's been very interesting to be in Sweden. It's been interesting to be at the Fibre to the Home Council, and interesting to spend some time with Stokab and your guests. I think the big thing is that everybody in Europe is not necessarily building fibre to the home. They have a big toolbox of options and things that they can use. Now, in New Zealand, we are building fibre to the home, but sometimes we need things in our toolbox because sometimes we cannot gain entry to properties. Sometimes it's very expensive to put the lead into the home. So if there's one thing we've learned, it's that the toolbox is expanding to solve the problems of fibre networks for not the last mile, not the last 100 metres, but perhaps for the last 10 or 50 metres. So we're going to go home and have a think about what these solutions mean to us, and how we can probably help some frustrated users who cannot get connected to the network.
And in 20 years, how will the situation for New Zealand look if you're talking about broadband?
Oh, I think in New Zealand will be a gigabit country. We have an initiative right now in New Zealand where we're going to make one town and city a gigabit town and city in 2015. We're running a competition, and we're going to enable 1 gigabit per second connectivity for the same price in that town and city next year. So that's 2015. You can imagine that all the inhabitants of one city in 2015 will have 1 gigabit per second connectivity. So in 10 or 20 years' time, I think everybody will have 1 gigabit per second connectivity. And if you want real vision, then this will reach deeply into rural. In New Zealand, we rely very heavily on our agricultural industry and the countryside. So we really need to make sure that fibre doesn't just reach the urban population, but fibre reaches the rural population too.
Thank you for taking the time to come to Stockholm, Sweden.
Thank you, Anders.